Alright, welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner Classic known classics. This is episode number 3452 and Doubleshot number 3346. Okay, so we're going to a series that was actually, believe it or not, also the name of a Disney Plus show. What If? This is What If the Complete Collection, Volume 1, collecting the first 12 issues of this very long-running, ongoing series. Oh my gosh, this thing keeps coming back. Believe it or not, this comic has put out over 200 issues. Yes. The writers, there's actually 3 of the writers here also serve as co-artists. Also does art for these issues. So, the 3 writers who are also the artists of these issues are Jack Kirby, Gil Kane, and Scott Shaw. The main writers just do writing. It's just Roy Thomas, Jim Shooter, and Don Kilt. Your artwork, aside from having Jack Kirby, and Scott Shaw, and Gil Kane, you also have Jim Craig, Herm Trippey, Frank Robbins, George DaCosta, Rick Hoberg, Alan Kupberg, and Sal Buscema. Rest in peace, Sal Buscema. He just recently passed away. I never met the guy. The writers. I've actually, believe it, met only one writer, Jim Shooter. Yep, he is the only one I've ever met. Have I met any of the artists? No. How about the inkers? I think I may have Pablo Marcos, maybe. So, the first issue is something that I think a lot of people wanted to see. What if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? Which is just an alternate take of what happened on issue 1 of Amazing Spider-Man, where basically at first he was turned down, and then eventually he's able to be swayed by Sue Storm to join Fantastic Four, which now the longer Fantastic Four, now Fantastic 5, which this has come to play a couple times. I'll get to that in a little bit. So, basically, him joining Fantastic Four, of course, the Chameleon here, the Vulture, Red Ghost. You have basically the Fantastic Five taking these villains. It's basically a mixture of the 60s comics for Spider-Man and Fantastic Four. Just, what if they both happen around the same period of time as each other as more like this? So, the concept of Fantastic Five it's actually been something that they would... Now, the whole thing of that we visited for the MC2 universe, which was Fantastic 5. They had a limited series, and they existed there. Spider-Man joined Fantastic 4. That actually did happen in continuity. Twice. First, as part of the new Fantastic Four, which he joined the team with Wolverine, the Dan Ketch Ghost Rider... it was him, Dan Ketch, Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and the Joe Fix the Hulk. Basically, he started a place because Sue Storm invited him to become part of Fantastic Four to film because I think it was Reed, Johnny, and Thing disappeared, so they took over as New Fantastic Four for a brief period of time, which then led to formation of Secret Defenders. They came back a few times over the years. They came back during Dan Slott's run for Fantastic Four. They even had a miniseries run by the late Peter David. But yeah, whole concept, and we're basically this is all presented by The Watcher, which I've heard the TV show What If is done the same way too. Of course, it's animated, which that led to the Marvel Zombies thing, which I thought this book was really good, really good. Like as for the first issue of a What If, yeah, smart idea. So the second issue, What If the Hulk had the brain of Bruce Banner? This actually happened in continuity after this. I'll get to that. So, yeah, instead of having the mind... Basically, it's only taking the first, around the first issue of Hulk. Where Bruce Banner is still the Hulk. He doesn't have, basically, the Hulk personality. It's of course, also we do show off here... watches how he actually wear it in the 70s and 80s. He wears even 90s as well. Where it's basically just... so... He becomes the Hulk, but it's still Bruce Banner. No Hulk personality. He, of course, marries Betty Ross. And it's a nice idea for it. Okay, so the answer to this question. Did this come in continuity? Did this complete with continuity? It did. Peter David had this happen during his run for Incredible Hulk. So, yeah, I've heard Rob Liefeld refer to this book as Marvel's Playbook. Yeah, play this in the main continuity while having these what if stuff. I kind of expressed this to James Shooter last time I saw him. He actually bought that. He actually did believe that. There's actually one good example that happens in this book that I did point to, and he actually agrees with me on that. So, yeah, you have Hulk kind of working with Fantastic Four. It's a really cool book here. Issue number 3. What if the Avengers had never been? So, the purpose of this issue is, like, okay, so it's like the first 2 issues of Avengers did happen, but what if the Avengers disbanded during issue 3? Where they decided not to go after the Hulk, despite the fact I want to go after the Hulk. So, instead, I think Wasp, and I think that eventually, because it could be a regular Avengers, so basically had to go after the Hulk. We have Donald Blake, who had apparently lost his powers. So you had Donald Blake, Hank Pym, and Janet Van Dyne put on iron suits to take on the Hulk. Yep, and they do in fact beat him. Or they beat the Submariner. Yeah. And by the end, Iron Man dies. So the whole thing of this issue here, I like the first couple of issues, which that did come in effect in the main continuity. Not the case issue 3. In the case of Iron Man dying, however, that never happened. Well, I would say that kind of happened in the mid-1990s with The Crossing, but that later be just an agent of K. Issue 4, discussed already in the Invaders, the only canon issue this entire series. So, moving on from that. Issue 5, this is something else that also did have eventually continuity too. Though it took longer. It's called What If Captain America Hadn't Vanished During World War II? So it's like, yeah, let's just kind of do this. So instead of basically dying in the experimental plane, he's saved, and then eventually, where Red Skull's still here, and then by the time of the 60s, where, and then Bucky takes over as, and then of course Steve retires as Captain America, and passes the mantle off to Bucky, which this did happen in the main continuity. It did. Bucky did become Captain America in the mid 2010s. For a few years. He stopped being Captain America around 2011. He did briefly resume the role for a miniseries, Falcon Winter Soldier, and afterwards he stopped being it. So I do like. Also interesting, though, you have Bucky, where he was the one who had a romantic relationship with Sharon Carter, not with Steve. Of course, he did die. Of course, Bucky did briefly die. Of course, and then Rick Jones. Moving on to what if Fantastic Four had different powers? Yeah, where on the cover it's like, oh, let's just have this other version of Fantastic Four counting under the main Fantastic Four. This doesn't happen in this book. It's basically, so what if they had different powers? So what do the powers get? So here's the power. So basically, Ben Grimm sprouts wings. Johnny Storm becomes metallic. Sue Storm becomes elastic, like she's Elastigirl. And no Reed. I think Reed was turned to a brain. Yeah, Reed was turned to a brain, and that was your Fantastic Four. It's kind of an interesting idea, but something which did never actually have main continuity. Well, it's just kind of what if thing, but it's fine. And of course, you had Doc Doom actually join the Fantastic Four. This actually would kind of happen not long after this, because it was released in the 70s. He would join the Fantastic Four very briefly to fight a threat. So he would join a couple times over the years, mostly with the bad guy. So next we have issue 7. This is a really interesting idea for this one. What if someone else became Spider-Man who had been bitten by a radioactive spider. And the choices are Flash Thompson, Jameson, and Betty Brant. They call her Spider-Girl here, which that did become basically a name in the main continuity and alternate continuity too. Betty Brant powers, that actually would never happen. Nope, never would. Flash would get powers in the 2010s as Agent Anti-Venom. Yeah, and Jameson getting powers, well, yeah, he had powers in the main continuity too, so yeah, he's basically like a werewolf. A really cool idea. Also, the Betty Brant one was basically supported by Peter. Also, Ben Parker did die too here. Really cool idea. So then we have issue 8. What if the world knew Daredevil was blind? Yes. So yeah, what if basically Daredevil being blind became public knowledge? And it basically looked like he started the same way. Then like finding Electro, obviously, and then eventually they find out he was blind. So, when this became a fact after taking on his criminals, he proceeded to give being Daredevil and decided to run for District Attorney, which becomes District Attorney anyways. The backup story here is, what if the spider bitten by a radioactive human? Yeah, it's like kind of weird. It's a weird story here. There's not much going on here. Then we have, what if the Avengers have fought evil during the 1950s? Okay, so this actually comes into play twice. So, your lineup for this group is Marboy, 3D Man, Venus, Gorilla Man, and the Human Robot. I'll get to basically just have to talk about this thing here. So, this group came together in the 50s, and they call themselves Avengers. This book is semi-canon in the main continuity. It's like, yeah, let's have basically they come together, fight evil, and after defeat some communists in order to avoid political stuff, they decided to just wipe from history course, fight Yellow Claw too. So, by the end, the group did disband by the end of the issue. So, in the case of, did this eventually happen in continuity? It did. It certainly did. So, most of this lineup, except for 3D Man, became part of what we know in present day as Agents of Atlas. And they were joined by Johnny Woo. Yellow Claw was there in the main mini-series that started off the Agent of Atlas series. And he died at the end of the original mini-series. Where it turns out everything Johnny Woo went throughout the entire comic history was nothing more than instead of for him to take over for him as the leader of the Atlas Foundation. So most of the same lineup. This 3D Man would not join the Age of Atlas. His successor would, but not him. So, and the other 50s thing. So the other 50s thing was the concept of Avengers in 50s would have main continuity in a concept developed by Brian Bendis known as Avengers 1959, which later had the miniseries. And oh boy, issue 10. What if Jane Foster had found the Hammer of Thor? And this is one of the things Rob Liefeld did point to in his podcast, which this did happen in continuity. Everybody knows about this whole thing, except she wore this outfit. But yeah, Jane Foster did become Thor in main continuity, so you could say this was a prototype of what Jason would use in the 2010s. Yeah, so instead of basically Blake finding the stick, it's basically Jane Foster. And she goes mostly with the same Avengers as, though she calls herself as Thordilus. So, yeah, mostly put in, of course, basically goes on the same adventures as the original Thor. Does follow Donald Blake, but she only got some powers. And for some reason, this is really weird. So, you have Lady Sif here wearing this white outfit she wore in the 60s. So, then, of course, they settle down, and it's a much more happy result here. And then eventually, she passes the hammer on to Donald Blake, which all continuity is restored by the end of it. Jane Foster go off on her own, do whatever. Then move on to issue 11. What if the Avengers were both become Fantastic Four? This is a comedy issue, which, yes, the cover itself is a nod to Avengers #1. Yeah. Yeah, the cover is obviously a homage to Avengers #1. It is basically it's like Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, who else was it? It was Jack Kirby. It's like, what if basically Stan Lee is Fantastic Four? That's basically just this. It's a really funny idea. No, this never happened in continuity. No, heck no. So, and then we went to the last issue. What if Rick Jones became the Hulk? This is another thing they did have in continuity too, but I'll get to that. So, basically the gist of this is that instead of, in the original Hulk #1, Bruce Wayne got hit by the gamma radiation. In this book, Rick Jones got hit by the gamma radiation, became the Hulk, and goes in the same kind of adventures that the original Hulk did. And this would happen in continuity too, except that he never became the Hulk, he became Abomination. But big thing of gamma radiation monster. So you could say, yes, this can happen. But otherwise, though, great book overall. I give the book roughly a 10 out of 10. Next up, we're going back to the year of 2007. Yes, with the New Avengers Illuminati. Written by Brian Michael Bendis. And of course, him and Brian Ray do the writing with Jim Chung in the artwork. Your lineup is basically the original Illuminati. Toys like Iron Man, Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, Mr. Fantastic, Namor, and Professor Xavier. Yes, the whole idea of this book, the whole concept of this group is, it's basically a big retcon. Yes. Now, Black Panther was offered to join the team, but he turned him down because he wanted to go behind his back. I think he did become the group's financer. So this is basically, this is actually their first and only miniseries they've ever had of their own. Yes. This group will later return for New Avengers Volume 3. Of course, they will return in basically the main Avengers book. They returned several times. So most of the book we just have the New Avengers. You have the Illuminati going to, of course, they will also help in the series Iron Man Legacy. This is basically them trying to stop the Skrull invasion. Of course, they get captured. And it's just this team operating behind the scenes. And of course, getting help from Thor, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, the Wasp, and Captain America. And yeah. Really cool flashback here. It's kind of like they're trying to prevent this Kree Skrull invasion, but that didn't work. So they got involved with that. So this particular first issue here is actually the primary reason why Secret Invasion happened. Then we have issue number 2, where Mr. Fantastic is revealed he actually has all the Infinity Gems. And basically in this book here, he gives all the Infinity Gems to all members of Illuminati. That's pretty much basically, so they get the hands on it, they go to some alternate realities, test stuff out. Really cool here. Of course, this will actually return several times. They'll want to get their hands on the gauntlet. The most primary example of this is New Avengers Volume 3, which they were be the primary force of the book. So then the Watcher comes in, and this will get all. Then they give, of course, he gives all the gems, and they move to issue number 3. First issue about Kree Skrull invasion. Second one's all about the Infinity Gauntlet. This issue here is pretty much basically kind of confirming the Illuminati was active during the Secret Wars. Kind of. And where Xavier becoming the theory that the Beyonder isn't human. He's basically talking to us with Namor. With Namor, basically whoever's Illuminati. And that's kind of the gist of this issue. It's basically all about Beyonder and going beyond worlds, seeing Beyonder again, who was back in his Alpha he wore in Secret Wars 2. Then we have this weird panel here with Doctor Strange and Baby Clea and what looks like to be the Scarlet Witch. And I'm like, you lucky bastard. To be in bed with these two beautiful women. Of course, it feels completely random. I read online they described this as in bed with two random women. On the one on his right, that's obviously Clea. That's obviously Clea, and of course you have Wanda there too. The whole thing of like Beyonder getting involved here. Really cool stuff here. Issue number 4. Well, the cover is Leandra, Invisible Woman, Clea, Medusa, and Madame Mask. Yes, all women who love. Well, except Madame Mask, who's not currently in a relationship with Iron Man. It's basically the ladies' turn. Yep. Anything that makes in the cover here, like, okay, so. And then we see Marvel Boy. This is the Ultra version of Marvel Boy who Grant Morrison created. Yeah, I think this was his first appearance. If I remember correctly, I think this was his first appearance since his visual miniseries. And then, of course, he later popped up, I think, in X-Men, where he took over the Cube. And this is just a loose appearance by him. And the whole point of this thing here is him becoming, and of course, mentioning about the original Marvel, Captain Marvel, which he kind of treated in Captain Marvel during Dark Avengers, so you could say this is looks good for that. Issue number 5, which I think, yeah, this is the last issue. This issue in particular is a prologue to Secret Invasion, where the cover is simply put the corpse of Elektra as the Elektra Scroll. So this happened in the second story arc. This happened the first arc just after Civil War 1 in New Avengers, where basically I think it was Echo had stabbed Elektra in the chest, and she reverted to a scroll, and then it was kind of revealed that Spider-Man betrayed the team and took the body to the Avengers, and then you have Tony talking to Doctor Strange about this. You see Black Bolt, and that's when they discover they see the corpse of the Elektra Scroll, like someone's going to replace people, and then they see Charles Xavier walking. Yes, he is walking. They're actually quite shocked the fact he's walking. Yes, so an explanation of why he was walking, that was due to an after effect of House of M. That's one of the consequences of House of M, was the fact he could walk again. So you can thank Scarlet Witch for him for walking, and that's believe it or not, that's one major thing from House of M that's never been undone. The major thing was undone was the whole thing of like the powering mutants. That was basically undone with Children's Crusade was started with, and was done bigly with Avengers vs. X-Men. The whole thing of the restoration of Charles Xavier's legs, this is something that's been never undone, because I think Marvel just likes the idea of, I guess Marvel almost like the idea of Charles Xavier walking. So basically debate this, and that's when they discover that the Black Bolt that's been there the whole time in this mini-series here is revealed to be a Skrull, and he possibly be the one who voted this and Hulk off the space. And basically the Illuminati kind of disbanded with this issue. Yep. Yeah, they all basically disband, and the course leads into Secret Invasion. Of course, they would reform after this. You're probably thinking, where did the Illuminati reform? Believe it or not, this group would not reform again until the second story arc of Bendis' run for Avengers in 2010. So they were gone for about 3 years. Yep, 3 years. Otherwise, this miniseries actually was really good. I enjoyed this. This is only a 5-issue miniseries. It's most of it 5 standalone issues, but was really good. I enjoyed this book. It's from a period of time that I felt as though Marvel was not very high at that point. Yes, because in my opinion, while I've been reading comics, the best years of Marvel comics have been from 05 to basically 2012. These years are filled with great comic books. Great comic books. This is how I feel about it. A lot of the comics published this period of time for the mainstream continuity, not a bad issue in this bunch. Yes, there's Civil War 1, obviously, and Fear itself, but aside from those two things, this is a period of time when basically Marvel got basically around the same page. A lot of really cool stuff. This has basically Bendis at his finest. Though you could say that Bendis started to slip after Secret Wars. Yes. Because I did point out, though, when I talk comic history for Brian McBendis, is that from 2000 to about 2015, like the first decade he was in Marvel Comics, all good stuff for him. And that emphasizes the first half of the 2010s, in my opinion, were really good. It's just that the one thing that kind of basically started to slip for him was all new X-Men 41. That's where it started to slip. And it's like one 2015 hit, that was basically his high ceiling at Marvel, though he would leave Marvel Comics a few years later anyway. So, though, if you want to think of, like, for a second half of the decade, what was his best comic he put out? In my honest opinion, it was Defenders and Jessica Jones. I love these two books. I thought they were amazing. Yep. As a miniseries, I think this was the first miniseries Bendis worked on. To my knowledge, I believe it is. Yes, this was the first one he worked on. I don't think he did it over Ninja. I don't think he worked on that one. I think it was somebody else. But I think this was the very first miniseries I could think of he worked on. Of course, he writes Secret Invasion how long after this. Could you say this book was a prologue to Secret Invasion? The final issue definitely was. I would say the first and last issue basically dealt with that. The rest of the issue dealt with other stuff, per se. Basically, it's like, the best way to describe Avengers Illuminati, it's basically like their history. It basically recaps their history, kind of. It kind of explains a lot of the stuff the Illuminati did for certain events over the years. That's kind of the purpose of the miniseries. But great overall. Brian Reed is a great writer. One of like only two books I know of that two books I reviewed that he wrote. The other being another really good book he wrote, which was his run for Miss Marvel. That lasted from 2005 to 2010. Excellent book. Lasted 50 issues. One of only two runs for Carol Danvers. The last 50 issues. The other being the Kelly Thompson Captain Marvel book. That was amazing as well. Yep, so yeah, that's pretty much a particular video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, to notifications. Next up is Free Rant. Okay, next video. Bye.